Welcome. This is a video for your lectures in BNTP 542 Exegesis. We'll start out with what is exegesis. Exegesis we'll look at three parts to exegesis. What is exegesis? Why study Greek exegesis? And Ladd's Greek exegesis methodology. It is Ladd's Greek exegesis methodology that you will be using throughout the course. But first, let's talk about what exegesis is. It comes from the Greek word exenomai, which means I lead out, narrate, explain, or tell the story. This comes first from 1 John. When John begins to say, no one has seen the Father at any time, Theo udes erokamen pante monetes Theo. The only begotten Son which has seen him has explained him. Jesus's purpose, one of his purposes on earth, was to explain the Father to the disciples. This is critical to understanding exegesis. Exegesis is the explanation, the narration, or the story. When we look at Luke, one of the key passages that touches our hearts is the disciples on the road to Emmaus after the crucifixion. They went early on Sunday morning and they began to explain kai utoi egeston ta and to udon. They began to explain their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. Notice, they begin to explain. They begin to tell the story. They begin to understand. Another place we see the same Greek verb is in the Council of Jerusalem. And in that Council of Jerusalem, the disciples and Paul and Barnabas and the early elders of Jerusalem struggled with the question of how shall we bring in Gentiles. And it says, Barnabas I palu egenomenon. All the people kept silent. They were listening to Paul and Barnabas as they were relating what signs and wonders God had done through them and the Gentiles. Notice, they were explaining. These three verses provide you with the interesting point that they were explaining, they were telling, they were relating. We explain the Scriptures. Beyond the New Testament, we see this in 1 Clement. Now, you remember that Corinthians was a Greek church that had quite a number of problems. First of all, it was located in Sin City, much like the Las Vegas and New York all rolled in one as far as sins. And in that, Paul had stayed and formed a church in Corinthians and written several letters because they struggled with the basic morality and they struggled with being loyal to one another or faithful because in the end the leadership fraction turns into fractions and the fractions split into two churches. And Clement, one of the people who had been an adjunct or an under-disciple, as Paul as he was an apostle, later settled in Rome, as Paul had gone to Rome. And he writes back to the church to try to settle one of these fights where the younger elders had deposed the older elders who'd served for 30 years. And in the end, he summarizes his reasons after having gone from 48 chapters describing the problem and then God's wonderful works. He says, who can describe tes dunatai en exegesis, who can explain the bond of love of Jesus? Again, this is explained. Now, what was explained? Jesus explained God. The disciples explained their experience of Christ in the crucifixion. Apostle and Barnabas explained God's actions to convert the disciples. And Clement asks, who can explain the bond of love when trying to show the Christians in Corinth how to resolve a conflict? So again, you see God being explained, experiences being explained, Paul and Barnabas explaining God's action, and Clement trying to explain the very nature of God. So this is basically what we see. We explain God, we explain the experience of the disciples, we explain God's actions, and we explain the very substance, the bond of Christian love that we have in Scripture. So 3 questions to ponder from this first explanation to the second is, who is at the center of your Greek exegesis? What are you explaining Scripture for? How does theology, one of the results of Greek exegesis, apply to Christians in church? And why do you preach? These are things we'll pick up in the second study, is why study Greek exegesis? What's the purpose behind all of this? And I hope that will be helpful for you. Thank you very much. And we'll pick this up with the second part of Ladd's Greek exegesis methodology.